In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Okay, that's good. We'll work on this. You should say it loudly and clearly so that you all say it together. Now, I have a question. Who knows what a relic is? It's a hard one. A relic is some piece of the life of a saint that remains with us today. Sometimes it can be their entire body, which by the grace of God does not fall apart, but is found as though they are sleeping, waiting for the resurrection. Sometimes it may be a piece of clothing. Sometimes it is something associated with them in life. So, today we celebrate the feast of the veneration of the chains of St. Peter. Have any of you ever heard of this feast? I wouldn't expect you to. It's kind of obscure, but it happens to fall today, on this Sunday. And it's from a great story in the book of Acts about the early days of the church. When the apostles were in the midst of the church, they were preaching to the people, and they were teaching in the streets, and they were going around healing by the grace and the power of God, who had sent them to do just that. But the people in power, the government, the kings, the rulers, they were uncomfortable with this. They didn't know where the Christian religion had come from. They were nervous about Jesus Christ because they knew that they'd killed him, and then they heard this rumor that he had risen from the dead, and that was just not pleasant for them to think about. And when you're in charge and you kill someone, you expect them to stay dead, right? So, if someone's coming back from the dead, that's a problem for you. So, the rulers were nervous about the church. So one day, the king, whose name was Herod, I've never met a good guy named Herod. Have you? Herod was the bad guy at Christmas, and Herod is the bad guy in this story. He goes and he takes Peter, who was the leader of the apostles, and he puts him in prison. And his plan is to wait until after Passover, after Pascha, and then to kill him, because then all the other people who weren't Christians would be happy with him. So Peter is sitting in the prison, and Herod wanted to make sure he didn't get away. So he put him against the wall, in chains, with 2 guards sitting there on either side of him. It would be hard to get away if this happened, right? So Peter wakes up in the middle of the night, but he thinks he's dreaming. And he sees an angel standing in front of him. And the angel says, "Get up, Peter, your work is not done. Come and follow me," out of the prison. And his chains fall off, as if they take themselves off, as if by invisible hands. Now Peter thinks he's dreaming. So he stands up and he follows the angel. He leaves his 2 guards behind. They're still sleeping. He walks through the one gate past other guards. He walks through the next gate past more guards. And then he walks up to the last gate that goes out of the temple, and the door opens itself. And the angel says, "Go back to the Christians and tell them what happened." So Peter steps outside of the gate. It closes. And then he realizes that this is not a dream. Probably he pinches himself, right? He thinks, what in the world is going on? What a miracle. So he goes and he knocks on the door. Now, since he's been imprisoned, all the other Christians have been praying for him night and day without any stopping. But they didn't really think anything was going to happen, right? Have you ever prayed like that? You pray, but you don't think anything's going to happen, but you pray because we tell you to pray anyway, right? Right. Well, sometimes something happens. He knocked on the door, and a young woman who was set to watch the door opens the shutter, and she sees Peter, who they've been praying for. And she's so excited that she closes the door again. She doesn't even let him in. She leaves him on the porch, and she runs into the room to tell the people that Peter's here. And they don't believe her. They say, "Oh, he's already dead. It's his ghost. It's his spirit. His angel has come to tell us that Peter is dead." And she's like, no, I promise. It's really Peter. So they go, and finally they open the door, and Peter walks in. And imagine how happy they were at that. Okay? So Peter went into hiding, and he continued to preach, and eventually he ended up in Rome. Now, his chains, somehow the church believes that they were preserved. Certainly there were some chains that in the 4th century they were found in Jerusalem. And when people went up to them and kissed them, thinking that they were the chains of Peter, they found that they had been healed of whatever sickness they had. So these chains were sent first to Constantinople, and then later they were sent to Rome. And they're even there now. So this is an example of a relic. It is something that is become holy, not because the iron or whatever makes up the chain is special, but because it had a part to play in the life of a central, holy Christian person. And because of this, it has itself become holy. It works the grace and the love and the healing of God for all of us. There is always a relic put in the altar table when it is consecrated. Now, this altar table was consecrated 50, 60 years ago when your yayades and papudes were young, not much older than you. But it has a relic of St. Barbara in it, and she lived in the 3rd century. Any questions for me? I know this is an unusual concept, but I want you to remember, when we talk about a relic, we're always talking about a story. And when there's a story, there's always a human person who lived just like we do, but who lived and encountered the reality of the grace of God much more deeply than we do. Not that we can't. And we are all called to follow them and imitate them. Okay? No questions? Sometimes someone should ask me a question. Do you have a question? That's right. The bad men took Peter to jail, but the angel took him back out again. So, and that's the basic story. Let's all stand up and we'll receive Holy Communion.